The modern buildings and streets behind me may seem an unlikely place to begin a show about hauntings. But nestled in the center of this modern sprawl lies a place that for over 250 years has largely remained impervious to the passage of time, the King George Inn. My name is Gina Caputi, and I will be your guide as we explore the history and haunts of this unique establishment. Built as a stagecoach stop in 1756 at the start of the French and Indian War, the King George Inn provided food, shelter, and even protection for many weary travelers. Located just outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania, and within sight of the famous Dorney Park, the King George Inn's tradition of colonial hospitality still remains today. And perhaps so did the ghosts who once patronized and lived in this ancient landmark. The parking lot of the King George is just like any other parking lot at any other establishment. But just underneath my feet is the final resting place and mass grave of the Dorney family who lived at the inn. Directly behind the Old Stone Tavern was a small field where local militia once drilled. First in preparation for attacks by Indians, and later British redcoats. Popular legend holds that a battle between settlers and Indian marauders was fought on this land immediately behind me. Another mass grave had to be dug for the casualties of war. Later generations found it easier to pave over the graves than to move them. This may have well been the catalyst for whoever or whatever haunts this place. Cliff McDermott has owned and operated the King George Inn for nearly 40 years. Rumors of its ghostly inhabitants were passed on to Cliff by longtime patrons over the years. At first he didn't know what to make of them, until he experienced firsthand the possibility that his newly acquired tavern may accommodate a non-paying guest or two. How long have you owned the inn? When did you buy it?
Let's see, Friday the 13th, 1970, November 13th. And that came about by, I stopped in here for a six-pack one, passing through town, and I bought the restaurant. Almost like that, believe me. Not quite, but.
What attracted you to the inn?
Well, I always liked old tavern and restaurant places, you know, and I sought them out, actually in travels. And I would look for them, and even though my background was advertising, I came from a hotel restaurant school, but my background was advertising. I would have never run like a Holiday Inn, for instance, or a hotel. I wouldn't like that. I liked this kind of a atmosphere, and it was an old coach stop and all that, and it really interested me, the history of it. So that's how I got involved in it.
When did you first hear stories about the hauntings?
Almost right away, as soon as we took over. Well, as original, my brother was in, my two brothers were in it with me, and we did all the work. You know, we tended bar, worked in the kitchen, did the whole thing ourselves, and we started hearing stories from the old-timers.
You had a creepy encounter in your office, didn't you?
Yeah, that was a number of years ago. I'd say about 12, 14 years ago. And I was in the office, and I had the door closed. Never locked, but I had it closed because I wanted to go out. I was sitting there with my back to the door, and I hear footsteps. And I hear someone coming up the stairs. And I think, who the hell is that? It couldn't be anybody in the kitchen. And they're not here. And not everybody has a key either. Because I reach over, just as I see the latch go up and disengage, because it comes out of that little groove, that little metal groove, and it goes, and I grabbed this bat, because I don't know, I thought maybe it was a burglary or something, and I just reach over and I push down and throw open the door and yell like a banshee. It might have scared the ghost. I mean, it really yelled, you know. And I thought if it was something that was some burglar or something, he'd run like hell. There was no one there. And I looked around, down the stairs. They couldn't have gone down the stairs that quick. But that was the first time I ever really was shook up about being here like that. And by myself, you know. And I find it best not to think about it, because I'm here all the time by myself in the morning.
Cliff's first encounter with the paranormal, while unsettling, was no real cause to be alarmed. His second encounter which occurred at the rear of the parking lot, was another story altogether.
But I was going, closing up, and everybody was gone, and it's when I used to stay here to the limit years ago. It was about 20 years ago, I guess. And I was in the parking lot, right in the middle of the parking lot, as I went to my car, and I looked back at the building, up at that peak in the back that you could see from the parking lot. There was this face looking down at me from up there. It was a very ghoulish face. Now, there was a candle in that window, because we used to have candles in all the windows at the time for a long while, and it was looking over it. You know how ghoulish somebody can look when they put a flashlight under their face? And it scared the hell out of me, you know. I mean, I looked at it, and it moved, you know, and I got in the car, and I told the girls the next morning, the kids had come into work, and I said, I saw this thing, and they said, did you come back in and go up there to check? And I said, are you kidding? Why? Why I'd have to do that? What the hell are they doing in the attic anyway? But that was really the only thing I ever saw, and I had never seen it after, just at one time.
These ghostly experiences prompted Cliff to further research the possible origins of the hauntings. And he discovered that many people over the years have died at this historic tavern. More unsettling still is these deaths were not confined to centuries past. In fact, an elderly son of a former owner of the King George Inn confirmed to Cliff that his father died in this very room, now a second-floor dining area, during the influenza epidemic of 1918. Soon, employees and patrons alike came forward with their own experiences with the eternal patrons of the King George. Once, a self-proclaimed psychic visited the inn in an attempt to make contact with the spirits here. She was not disappointed.
I just joked with Nancy about it at the time. I was expecting a kind of a real wretched looking old lady, the stereotypical psychic witch type looking, and here's this young blonde woman, nattily dressed and everything, and I found time for her right away. No. She said, I saw a woman, an apparition of a woman standing right in the hall with two young children, and they were dressed in clothing that is not of our time. She said it was just, I just knew that they were from another time and place, you know, and she said they were typical things I see.
Over the years, many people have reported seeing a mysterious figure dressed in colonial period clothing lurking about the King George Inn. Like all the spirits who dwell here, his identity is unknown.
We've had various people see that individual. My friend has seen an individual like that just recently too. But I've had various people see that figure. I never have, but they have. You know, upstairs, one of our busboys years ago, on a busy Saturday night, went up to get something for up that back stairway to get something for the chef. And he was there, and it's a very narrow room. It's only 8 or 10 feet across, but then the shelves are out on one side a couple of feet, so it's very narrow. And he sort of sensed something behind him rather than felt it or saw it. And he turned around, and there was an apparition right next to him, right on top of him. And he said he was, once again, the way he looked, he appeared, and his clothing was not of our time. And the reason I place some credulence in this boy's attitude too is he came back about 10 years ago or so, and he was a man now, but we went to MIT. He was an honor student, and I asked him, I said, I remember his name was Tommy. I said, Tommy, you remember that time? He said, that was legitimate, wasn't it? He said, oh yeah.
Perhaps the most disturbing and terrifying occurrence at the King George Inn happened during the early 1940s in this area known as the John Bull Wine Bar. This bar is located on the basement floor of the inn. Like most early American homes with no running water or indoor plumbing, the inhabitants of the King George had to rely on well water for their daily needs. A homestead with a reliable well and thick stone walls was a good defense against marauding French and Indian attackers, unless the enemy could figure out a way to poison the water source.
One of the old-timers again said that he heard the hand-me-down story of during the Indian uprising in the 1750s, that they used to do that. They would disembowel children and put them in the well to force the people to come out.
Atrocities against the early colonists during the French and Indian War were graphic, tragic, and sadly commonplace. Even more unfortunate was the fact that the victims were primarily women and children.
But this was about the woman that used to work in a scullery. It was during the war, I believe 40, 41, 42. She went downstairs to hang some linen, and she got way up in the front near the well. When they found her a few hours later, she was like delirious. Supposedly they took her to the hospital. And when she recovered, she told them the only thing that she can remember was hearing a baby cry. And it was coming from the well. And she said it was really intense, and she could really hear the child crying.
What exactly the woman heard or even saw during her long ordeal is not known. But, from time to time, the sounds of a crying baby have been reported by staff and customers alike. According to paranormal researchers, there are basically two types of hauntings: residual and active. A residual haunting can best be described as a videotape recording looped in time. Contact with the ghost is usually impossible. An active haunting is much more interesting. You see the ghost, and the ghost sees you. To make matters worse for the unsuspecting witness, contact is often made.
And Mike, I have to go on record as saying this because I believe it, and I spoke to other people about it. I think some people can see these things. We maybe, the others, just sense them like I did once in a while, like I do once in a while. But some people can see them and others can't. They're there all the time, probably.
Are ghosts real? Do they exist? 1/3 of all Americans believe they do. If so, are they spirits of the dead, remaining at places they once loved? Or are they trapped souls, doomed to remain earthbound, prisoners of a certain place and time? The reenactments you have seen are based on true events. As unnerving and shocking as they may seem, the ghosts have never harmed anyone. In fact, Cliff, his staff, and the inn's loyal regulars consider them family. And these eternal patrons add even more character to a place overfilling with it.
You know, it stands to reason that the older an establishment is, whether it's a home or a business, it would just seem like it would conjure up more like old castles in Scotland, Ireland, and England, like we're talking about. They're hundreds of years old, some of them 1,000 years old, that you would think just because they're old, and a lot of people have died there.
For over 250 years, the King George Inn has stood silent witness to the passage of time. Who knows what kind of dramatic or traumatic events have played out within its stone walls. For award-winning cuisine, wine, spirits, and, well, spirits, King George reigns supreme. I'm Gina Caputi. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and pleasant dreams.